Hi, I'm Radical Coder. This is Umbreon. And real quick, before we dive in, if you want to make sure this little dude stays fed and warm, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments what I got right, what I got wrong, or what you want to argue about. Let's go.
What's up, everyone? So I just wanted to real quick. I just woke up at like 2 a.m. You know how it be, and I've been loosely following the Trump deployment of National Guard troops to LA, and I just wanted to kind of read an article about it and reflect on it like in real time. And I'll clip this down. Maybe I won't even edit this at all. We'll see how it goes. But let me know if what do you think about this this kind of format? I might do more stuff like this in the future, just kind of reacting to news or whatever in real time. But here we go. This is an AP article, What to Know About Trump's Deployment of National Troops to LA Protests. So here we got a picture of protesters kicking the side of a Border Patrol vehicle during a demonstration over the dozens detained in an operation by federal immigration authorities a day earlier in Paramount, California. So President Trump says he's deploying over 2,000... President Trump says he's deploying 2,000 California National Guard troops to Los Angeles to respond to immigration protests over the objections of Gavin Newsom. It's not the first time Trump has activated the National Guard to quell protests. In 2020, he asked governors of several states to send troops to Washington, D.C. to respond to demonstrations that arose after George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police officers. Many of the governors he asked agreed, sending troops to the federal district. The governors that refused the request were allowed to do so, keeping their troops on home soil. This time, however, Trump is acting in opposition to Newsom, who under normal circumstances would retain control in command of California's National Guard. While Trump said that federalizing troops was necessary to address the lawlessness in California, the Democratic governor said the move was purposely inflammatory and will only escalate tensions. I believe I saw a tweet from Newsom where he said he encouraged people to absolutely do not use any violence. Don't give them a reason to make it a spectacle, like that they're trying to make it a spectacle, and don't give them a reason, right? Don't let them, which I second. Yeah, I know, puppy. Here are some things to know about when and how the president can deploy troops on U.S. soil. The laws are apparently a bit vague, so generally federal military forces are not allowed to carry out civilian law enforcement duties against U.S. citizens except in times of emergency. An 18th century wartime law called the Insurrection Act is the main legal mechanism that a president can use to activate the military or National Guard during times of rebellion or unrest. But Trump did not invoke the Insurrection Act on Saturday. So when I first heard about this, I saw like a Kyle Kulinski video where he said that Trump did invoke the Insurrection Act. To his credit, I assume what he meant is that he was sending the National Guard, and he presumed that he was using the Insurrection Act. So I assume he's going to correct that, but he didn't technically invoke the Insurrection Act. Instead, he relied on a similar federal law. So again, it's kind of similar, right? So he's a little Insurrection Act as a treat, right? So instead, he relied on a similar federal law that allows the president to federalize National Guard troops under certain circumstances. The National Guard is a hybrid entity that serves both state and federal interests. Often it operates under state command and control using state funding. Sometimes National Guard troops will be assigned by their state to serve federal missions, remaining under state command but using federal funding. The law he did use. So the law cited by Trump's proclamation places National Guard troops under federal command. The law says that can be done under three circumstances. So here's those three circumstances. 1, when the U.S. is invaded or in danger of invasion. 2, when there is a rebellion or danger of rebellion against the authority of the United States government. And 3, when the president is unable to execute the laws of the United States with regular forces. Okay, so my understanding is that I guess this would have to fall under this second one, presumably. But it's still that bar is gonna have to be met, right? Or they're gonna have to prove that bar is met. I'm not sure exactly how the fallout of this will happen, but because I believe that it's been what I've heard over and over is that the regular forces there's nothing that National Guard is able to do there that ICE isn't able to do, for example, or that the California Authority doesn't already have the ability to do. But the law also says that orders for those purposes shall be issued through the governors of the states. See, that Newsom obviously did not. It's not immediately clear if the president can activate National Guard troops without the order of the state's governor. Yeah, so obviously Gavin Newsom did not agree to this. So that's going to be a complication. The role of the National Guard troops will be limited. Notably, Trump's proclamation says the National Guard troops will play a supporting role by protecting ICE officers as they enforce the law, rather than having the troops perform law enforcement work. Okay, so they're supposed to be protecting ICE officers rather than having them perform the law enforcement. Steve Vladeck, a professor at Georgetown University Law Center who specializes in military justice and national security law, says that's because the National Guard troops can't legally engage in ordinary law enforcement activities unless Trump first invokes the Insurrection Act. That checks out. Vladeck says the move raises the risk that troops could end up using force while filling that protection role. That is obviously a concern. The move could also be a precursor to other more aggressive troop deployments down the road, he wrote on his website. So that's I don't actually want to go to his website, but you know what? I'll save that. Sure. Okay, so this is what I heard about when I decided I wanted to cover this. So I was so troops have been mobilized before, so I think this will be interesting. This will come up a lot as the fallout of this. Like people will talk about when troops have been mobilized, when the Insurrection Act has been used. So let's explore that. So the Insurrection Act and related laws were used during the Civil Rights era to protect activists and students desegregating schools. So very, very different circumstances, right? President Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock, Arkansas to protect black students integrating Central High School after the state's governor activated the National Guard to keep the students out. So he was still going against the will of the governor, but in that case, the governor was trying to use the National Guard to prevent black students from integrating, and Eisenhower said, no, nope. And I believe that's following, I assume that's following like Brown v. Board. George H.W. Bush used the Insurrection Act to respond to riots in Los Angeles in 1992 after the acquittal of white police officers who were videotaped beating black motorist Rodney King. Okay, so that's another example. I don't know as much about that one. I was pretty young when that happened, so I'll be interested to learn more about that. National Guard troops have been deployed for a variety of emergencies, including the COVID pandemic, hurricanes, and other natural disasters. But generally, those deployments are carried out with the agreements of the governors of the responding states. Yeah, donate to AP. Give them some money. They deserve it. So this does signal that Trump is willing to use the military on home soil. This is probably the biggest concern, biggest takeaway. In 2020, Trump asked governors of several states to deploy their National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. to quell protests that arose after George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police officers. Many of the governors agreed, sending troops to the federal district. At the time, Trump also threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act for protests following Floyd's death in Minneapolis, an intervention rarely seen in modern American history. But then Defense Secretary Mark Esper pushed back, saying the law should be invoked only in the most urgent and dire of situations. Shout out Mark Esper for saying, hey, chill, dude. Trump never did invoke the Insurrection Act during his first term, and he hasn't done it yet either, to be clear. But while campaigning for his second term, he suggested that would change. Trump told an audience in Iowa in 2023 that he was prevented from using the military to suppress violence in cities and states during his first term, and said if the issue came up again in his next term, I'm not waiting. Trump also promised to deploy the National Guard to help carry out his immigration enforcement goals, and his top advisor, Stephen Miller, explained how that would be carried out. Troops under sympathetic Republican governors would send troops to nearby states that refused to participate, Miller said on the Charlie Kirk show. What a nightmare situation. I want to read that again. That's really a scary thought. Trump's under sympathetic Republican governors would send troops to nearby states that refuse to participate, Miller said on the Charlie Kirk show. What a terrifying sentence. After Trump announced he was federalizing the National Guard troops on Saturday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said other measures could follow. Hegseth wrote on the social media platform X, also known as Twitter, that active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton were on high alert and would also be mobilized if violence continues. So I guess that's that. We have a sitting U.S. president bypassing the governor of California to deploy National Guard troops, not to help with a wildfire or to respond to some sort of natural disaster or to protect black students integrating into schools, but to protect federal agents from public dissent. This is effectively the federalization of local forces to suppress protests and open signaling that the next step might be active duty Marines. So obviously this isn't just about California. This is kind of normalizing force against U.S. citizens on U.S. soil, and it's kind of a calculated erosion of state autonomy to further a more centralized, militarized agenda. And this is happening in real time under a regime that's already been very clear that they're not waiting for permission. So, be safe. I agree with Gavin Newsom. Don't give them a reason. Don't give them a spectacle. but I strongly support the peaceful protesters out there who are fighting a good fight, and people in general who are just trying to follow all this, trying to keep track of it all, and stay aware and keep learning. Learning is radical. Again, always seems increasingly radical every day to be aware of what's actually going on. So keep it up, and like and subscribe. Appreciate you all. Much love.
Fizz in my cup, swimming good love. It was you at the club, miss your touch. Go again, baby, what's up? Nothing feels right, so let's mess up everything.